The story opens in a chaotic scene inside a grand room where shattered porcelain and red liquid are scattered across the floor. A woman named Diarin stands trembling and sweating, telling herself that this is not a battlefield, even though it looks like one. Before her is a man with wild, dark hair and glowing purple eyes who is in a blind rage, smashing his fist into the wall right next to her head. Diarin tries to soothe him by saying everything is all right, but she knows it is a lie as she fears for her life. Suddenly, a blue system window appears in the air, announcing that the daily quest, Taming the Mad Dog, is complete. The man's rage instantly vanishes, and he collapses heavily onto Diarin, resting his head on her shoulder. A message notes that she calmed him down 10 seconds faster than before. The man, who was just a terrifying beast, now looks at her with large, teary puppy eyes and refuses to let her go. He clings to her and mumbles, asking her to stay with him. The story then goes back in time to explain how Diarin ended up in this situation. It started at a large cathedral where Diarin worked as an ordinary priestess. She was frustrated because despite working hard for 7 years and suffering through difficult tasks without any family connections, she was still stuck at a low rank. She complained that nobody acknowledged her efforts and that she was treated like a cog in a machine. One day, she was summoned by the chief priestess. Diarin hoped this meant she was finally getting a promotion. The chief priestess, an older woman with glasses, smiled kindly and praised Diarin's skills. However, Diarin was wary because she had been sent to dangerous battlefields in the past where she almost died. Determined not to be used again, Diarin told the chief priestess that she would not do the job unless she received a specific, realistic reward. The chief priestess promised that if she succeeded, she would land a high-ranking position at the central temple. Blinded by the chance for a promotion, Diarin happily agreed to do whatever was asked of her. The chief priestess then revealed the catch. Diarin had to take care of a specific person. It was a former soldier from the 8th Battalion, known as the Berserkers, who had been broken by the war. The chief priestess referred to him as a rabid dog who couldn't recognize allies and tore apart anyone he saw. Diarin was terrified and tried to refuse, screaming that she hated fighting and blood. However, the chief priestess just smiled and wished her luck as 2 large guards appeared behind Diarin to escort her away by force. Diarin was taken to a massive, wealthy mansion. There, she met the man she was assigned to heal. He was wild, dangerous, and unable to control his power, looking more like a monster than a human. Now, Diarin is trapped in this daily cycle of calming down the berserk man who becomes incredibly attached to her the moment he regains his senses. The narrative takes a step back into the blood-soaked history of the war to explain the terrifying reputation of the man Diarin has been sent to heal. The conflict between Lacleon and its neighbor, Sorbin, had dragged on for so long that the Lacleon army was demoralized, facing repeated defeats that made the war feel like a hopeless lost cause. Just as total defeat seemed inevitable, a miracle occurred. A small, mysterious group of soldiers known as the 8th Battalion appeared out of nowhere. These warriors possessed a terrifying strength and speed that seemed almost supernatural, and they single-handedly turned the tide of the war. However, their fighting style was so brutal and unhinged that both their enemies and their own allies stopped calling them saviors and began referring to them as mad dogs. Despite their pivotal role in saving the country, the 8th Battalion's existence was kept a closely guarded secret due to their uncontrollable, crazy behavior. Instead of receiving medals, they vanished into the shadows, while the 2nd Imperial Prince took all the public glory, waving to adoring crowds in a pristine uniform, while the real heroes suffered in silence. Back in the present day, Diarin sits awkwardly in a moving carriage across from Robin Tarok, the Lacleon Army Chief of Staff. While she politely smiles and claims she is simply following God's calling, internally she feels like cattle being dragged back to a slaughterhouse. Robin smiles pleasantly and hands her a small silver whistle attached to a chain. He chills her to the bone when he explains its purpose. It is a safety device designed to keep the puppies under control when they get overly excited. As the metal clinks against her chest, Diarin realizes with horror that the military's special method is no metaphor. They literally treat these traumatized human beings like animals to be trained and disciplined. The carriage arrives at a magnificent estate, and Robin leaves her there with a cheerful wave, reminding her to keep the whistle close. No sooner has she stepped out than a blur of servants appears, whisking away her luggage with supernatural speed before vanishing, leaving Diarin standing completely alone in a massive, silent hallway. At first, the eerie silence unnerves her, as she realizes there isn't a living soul in sight to help her. However, her fear is momentarily eclipsed by the sheer luxury of the mansion. Comparing the opulent surroundings to her old cramped room at the temple, which felt like a coffin, she decides that living in a luxurious doghouse might be worth the risk. Her mood swings drastically as she begins spinning happily through the halls, calling herself Spinderella and playfully challenging anyone to block her path. Full of newfound confidence, Diarin marches up to the white room at the end of the hall, ready to meet her patient. She throws the door open with a dramatic flair, announcing her grand entrance. But her smile instantly freezes. Inside, she finds a dark-haired man crouching amidst a room destroyed by violence, surrounded by shattered debris and emitting a terrifying, jagged purple aura. He looks up, revealing a single glowing purple eye filled with predatory rage, and lets out a low, menacing growl. Diarin stands paralyzed in the doorway, suddenly remembering the harsh house rules. There are no guards inside, only at the gate. She realizes that if he decides to attack her with those muscles, she will almost certainly die. Trembling, she tries to stammer out a polite greeting, "Pleased to meet you," hoping to reach the human buried beneath the beast. For a fleeting second, the growling stops, and Diarin feels a spark of hope that he has calmed down. But she is dead wrong. In a split second, the man launches himself at her with a terrifying whoosh, his massive form shrouded in dark energy. Diarin clutches the silver whistle in a shaking hand, realizing too late that she had been completely mistaken about being safe. Her breath hitches as the mad dog towers over her, blocking out the light, ready to tear her apart. Dirian realizes she has no choice. In a panic, she pulls out a small golden whistle and blows into it with all her might. A sharp, magical sound creates a shockwave of blue energy that instantly encircles the Duke's neck. The effect is immediate and brutal. The mad dog chokes in pain and collapses face forward onto the floor, knocked completely unconscious before he can even make a sound. Dirian is left trembling, staring at the small whistle in her hand, terrified by its potency. She looks down at the Duke's prone body and begins to panic, wondering if the artifact was too strong and if she has accidentally killed the very person she was sent to heal. She cautiously approaches him, poking his shoulder to see if he is still alive, hoping he isn't just playing dead to trick her. As she inspects him, her fear turns to confusion and pity. She notices dark, rope-like bruises around his neck, marks that looked like he had been strangled, which were not there just moments ago. Seeing him slumped uncomfortably on the floor, Dirian's soft nature takes over. A cruel text box floats in the air, labeling her a pushover, defining her as someone foolish and easily taken advantage of, as she struggles to drag his heavy, muscle-bound body into a comfortable position. Despite her vow to keep her divine powers hidden to avoid being exploited by greedy people, a lesson she learned from a childhood filled with people using her, she decides to help him. She reasons that since he's unconscious, he won't know she healed him. She places her glowing hands on his chest, using her divine light to erase the fresh wounds and old scars that mar his skin, not wanting him to look like a sketchbook of injuries. Just as she finishes and admires her handiwork, noticing how noble he looks when peaceful, a sudden jolt of energy ripples through the room. The Duke's violet eyes snap open. Finding a strange woman touching his chest, he reacts on instinct and violently headbutts her. The force of the blow sends Dirian flying across the room, where she crashes into the wall, convinced for a moment that she is dying. She scrambles up, bleeding from her nose, and sees a dark, menacing shadow looming over the Duke. Realizing he reacted out of fear and agitation, she quickly uses her powers again, not to heal, but to soothe. The divine light washes over him, and the terrifying beast instantly melts away. His eyes lose their focus, and he sits docilely on the floor, surrounded by an aura of harmless chicks, looking like a confused puppy. With the tension broken, the Duke blinks and quietly asks for her name. When Dirian mentions she is hungry, the once violent man meekly suggests they eat together in the room. Dirian, realizing he is now completely obedient, tells him to sit tight while she fetches food. She skips down the hallway, excited about the prospect of a fancy palace dinner, leaving the mad dog wagging an imaginary tail behind her. However, the story shifts to an ominous scene elsewhere in the manor. A blonde woman sits by a window surrounded by white doves, noting that the priestess has arrived and that they might be able to visit him soon. As she speaks about the great malice pursuing the Duke, a plate of steak on her table suddenly shatters for no reason, splattering blood-red sauce everywhere. A dark omen that Dirian's troubles are only just beginning. The fancy palace dinner Diarin had dreamed of arrives, but it is far from a peaceful affair. Without warning, the high-tension atmosphere in the room snaps when a plate of steak is sent flying, shattering into jagged ceramic shards as meat and vegetables scatter across the floor. Lord Saris stands before her, gasping for air as a dark red liquid sprays from his mouth, staining his hands and his open shirt. Diarin's green eyes bulge in absolute terror. Witnessing what she believes is a fatal hemorrhage, she rushes to his side as he collapses among the debris. Are you all right? You threw up so much blood, she screams, her mind racing through every healing spell she knows. In a frantic, hasty attempt to save him, she places her glowing hands on his chest, desperate to detoxify him, even though she has never performed such a feat before. However, as she leans in to whisper comfort, a familiar scent hits her nose. She begins to sniff the air near his wounds. Her panic instantly evaporates into a sheepish, hysterical laugh. "Oh gosh, it was juice. I thought it was blood," she sighs, with a massive phew, realizing the red splatter was merely a very convincing beverage. The relief is short-lived. As Diarin babbles apologies for her outburst, a terrifying purple aura begins to radiate from Saris. A spectral, monstrous wolf looms behind him, signaling that the mad dog is far from tamed. He reaches out with a juice-stained hand and grabs her, sending a wave of chills down her spine. While she nervously jokes about him choking because he was too hungry, Saris utters a single, bone-chilling word: poison. He reveals that all the food she brought was laced with toxins. Diarin freezes, her face turning a sickly blue as she realizes she hasn't eaten all day, and her stomach lets out a loud rumble. While Saris appears immune to the taste of poison, she certainly is not. Facing the prospect of starving to death or being eaten by a mad dog, she makes a desperate resolution. Summoning a manic surge of confidence, she lets out a fierce "hoo! Ha!" and tells Saris to trust her. With a heavy stomp, she marches out of the room, leaving a puzzled Saris sitting among the shattered plates. Diarin finds the kitchen, but her resolve wavers when she realizes she barely knows how to boil water. She settles on potatoes, carrots, and flour, reasoning that raw ingredients are harder to poison. As she wields a kitchen knife with a frightening shing, she ignores the cries of the personified vegetables and begins to chop. Having reached out to Lord Robin, she's interrupted when he bursts in looking completely haggard. He panics, fearing Saris has escaped, but Diarin silences him with a terrifying "shh." She warns the Lord Mad Dog is in a foul mood from hunger, while smoke begins to waft from her stove. Robin looks at the blackened, charred birds sizzling in her pan and asks, "Do you dabble in curses as a hobby?" Diarin pouts, realizing her dinner is burning, but she stands by her choice of ingredients. She explains to a skeptical Robin that she chose the bird because something small and cute is better than poison, revealing that Saris actually caught the bird for her by hurling his gold candlestick at it. Robin shrugs, noting the meal looks too small and cute to be dinner, but Diarin is just relieved to have something safe to serve. Lord Robin praises her impressive progress, but admits he has sent his soul on vacation for work-life balance. Then he drops the final bombshell. Lady Charlotte and Prince Sevian will be visiting soon. Staring at her unseasoned survival soup, Diarin feels her world collapsing. The history of Lochleon is written in blood and fleeting favor. The first empress lies cold upon the ground, her crown abandoned in the dirt, paving the way for the mistress Penelia to seize the throne. Yet even a crown cannot buy the emperor's heart. His devotion has already shifted to the beautiful Charlotte and her son Sevian. It is this golden pair that Diarin must now feed, a task made impossible by the shadow of the mad dog, Lord Saris. Diarin's mind spirals into a dark premonition as she imagines Charlotte and Sevian coming to visit the mad dog. In her vision, the innocent child reaches out to the warrior, only to be met by a hulking, terrifying monster wreathed in violet energy. She quickly forces the thought away, muttering to herself to stop imagining such a disaster. If anything were to happen to the Emperor's favorites, her head would be on the chopping block. The fancy soup Diarin promised turns into a culinary nightmare. A dark, purplish sludge bubbles violently in the pot, emitting a thick, ominous smoke that fills the room. As she screams in panic, "Ah, my soap!" the concoction defies the laws of nature. Under the watchful, horrified eyes of Lord Robin, a spectral, bird-like figure erupts from the pot with a piercing "ee!" wreathed in violet energy. Robin, ever the skeptic, watches the toxic substance take shape and asks if the power to create life is part of her divine abilities. Diarin, clinging to him in terror as a sentient blue slime-like blob lets out a confused "cute," can only squeak that it sure seems like it. Robin's disgust is absolute as he holds the pot at arm's length, branding the wriggling creature a spawn of Satan. The high-tension atmosphere snaps when the mad dog himself, Lord Cerys, appears at the door. His shirt is open, revealing his scarred, powerful chest, and he huffs with an aura of pure doom. In a voice that sends chills down Dairon's spine, he growls a single blood-red demand: "Give me food." Before Robin can dispose of the insult to food, Cerys acts. He ignores the fact that the sludge is stuck to the pot and begins to chomp and munch on the sentient blue mass. Dairon watches with a ghostly blue face, stammering, "Does it taste okay?" Cerys merely gulps it down and demands more, proving that the beastly weapon of the 8th Battalion can digest anything, even Dairon's accidental magic. While Cerys noms his way through the pot, Robin reveals the grim truth of the warrior's upbringing. He explains that children like Cerys are raised specifically for the 8th Battalion, their senses honed to animalistic levels, and their bodies tempered by forbidden spells to build an immunity to every toxin. In this battalion, there are no failures. Those who cannot withstand the training are made to disappear as if they never existed. Dairon is sickened, her moral compass spinning as she realizes the temple's divine powers were abused for such violence. She resolves to stay an average priestess and out of these dark politics, yet she can't help but flinch when Cerys slides the empty pot back to her, silently demanding a second helping of her toxic waste. As the long, grueling day ends, Dairon retreats to her quarters under the light of a full moon. She is physically and emotionally spent, leaning against her window with a heavy sigh. After tasting a bit of her own cooking and nearly gagging with a fierce blech, she is more convinced than ever that Robin's promise of fresh, poison-free ingredients is a literal godsend. She collapses into her bed, finding a singular moment of peace. The blanket is softer than anything she has ever felt, a small luxury in an empire of blood and poison. "I guess there's at least one thing good in everything," she whispers, her eyes fluttering shut with the comforting thought that she will at least be sleeping well. The peace is shattered in an instant. Suddenly, she feels a heavy, overwhelming presence in her room. Her eyes snap open to see a dark silhouette looming over her bed. It is Lord Cerys, his chest bare and his violet eyes glowing with a terrifying intensity in the moonlight. Dairon's heart hammers against her ribs as she stares up at the mad dog who has invaded her sanctuary, realizing that the survival she prayed for has only become more dangerous. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.